The galaxy had fallen into darkness. The once bright stars now flickered dimly as the Zalkorians, a fierce alien race, took control of every corner of the universe. For centuries, they had crushed any species that stood in their way. Worlds that once knew peace were now ravaged by war. The Zalkorians ruled with an iron fist, their ships as dark as the night sky, their weapons deadly and unstoppable. In the heart of the galaxy, the human race had been nearly wiped out. The Great War between humanity and the Zalkorians had left Earth in ruins, and the surviving humans scattered across the stars. The galaxy's leaders believed that humanity was extinct, nothing more than a memory in the pages of history. But there was one place, a forgotten corner of space, where the human fleet had been left behind. Buried under layers of dust and time, the fleet had been hidden, waiting for the day when it could awaken once more. On the planet Epsilon 6, far from the reach of the Zalkorian Empire, an ancient signal activated. The planet was abandoned, its surface scarred from previous battles, its air thick with silence. However, deep beneath the surface, hidden inside a massive underground bunker, something stirred. The ancient warships, once the pride of the human military, powered up. The ships, colossal and battle-worn, had remained dormant for centuries, their systems long forgotten. But now, with a flicker of energy, they hummed to life. In the control room of the flagship Ardent Justice, the dormant AI came online. The room was dark, filled with dust and cobwebs. But the moment the systems powered up, the once-forgotten warship seemed to come alive. The AI's voice echoed through the room, its tone calm but filled with purpose. Humanity is not lost. The time to rise is now. The fleet's ancient crew stations lit up one by one. On the command deck, the cockpit's holographic displays flickered and came to life. The ship's engines roared as they slowly powered up, ready to return to the fight. But there was no crew, no soldiers, only the echoes of a long-forgotten war. Meanwhile, light years away, aboard the Zalkorian mothership, the galaxy's most ruthless conquerors, the invasion leaders sat in their command room, watching as the galaxy slowly bent to their will. Their empire stretched from one star system to the next. Planets fell, one after the other, until only a few resistant pockets remained. The Zalkorians believed their power was unmatched, their technology too advanced for any species to challenge them. Jarok, the supreme commander of the Zalkorian fleet, watched the stars on his massive holographic display. His eyes narrowed, the corners of his mouth curling into a sneer. His soldiers had crushed all opposition, and it seemed that the human resistance was nothing more than a story told around campfires. Humanity had been wiped from the stars. But Jarok had underestimated the humans. The Zalkorian sensors began to beep. Something unusual was happening in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, something that should have been impossible. "Report," Jarok ordered, his voice cold and commanding. An officer, his voice trembling slightly, spoke up. "Supreme Commander, we've detected an anomaly. In the Epsilon sector, there's a fleet, but it shouldn't be possible. We believe it's a human fleet, sir." Jarok's expression twisted with disbelief. Humans? Impossible. They were wiped out. Their fleet was destroyed. The officer's voice grew more urgent. "It's not just one ship, Commander. It's a full fleet. Old ships. They're coming online. They've powered up." A long silence followed. Jarok's eyes burned with rage, and for the first time in years, a sense of fear crept into his mind. The humans were supposed to be gone. Their fleet had been crushed long ago. But if there was even a chance that they had somehow survived, the Zalkorians would not allow them to challenge their rule. "Prepare the fleet. We'll crush them as we did before. There will be no second chances for humanity." Jarok snarled, his voice dripping with malice. Back on the human fleet, the crew of the Ardent Justice was slowly coming together. Commander Sarah Monroe stood in front of a massive display screen, looking over the fleet she had inherited. The ships were old, their surfaces scratched and battered, but they still carried the potential to change the course of the war. She had been trained for years, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. For a moment, Sarah's thoughts went back to Earth, the home she had never truly known. She had been born on one of humanity's last colonies, a place far from the war, but she had heard the stories. Her family had always told her that humanity would rise again, that they weren't done yet. But now, standing on the bridge of a warship that hadn't been in use for centuries, the weight of that hope felt real. "Commander Monroe," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Carter, the fleet's weapons officer. "The fleet is ready. We're just waiting for your orders." Sarah looked around at the crew that had assembled. Young faces, old faces. Some had never seen a real battle, and others had only known war their entire lives. But they were all united now, the last hope for humanity. "We fight to survive," she said quietly. "We fight because humanity's future depends on us. Prepare for battle. The Zalkorians think we're gone, but they'll soon learn that humanity isn't so easily defeated." The crew responded with a resounding "Yes, Commander," and the Ardent Justice's engines roared to life. The fleet moved into formation, ready to face the Zalkorians once again. As the fleet began to leave Epsilon 6, the massive ship's lights flickered on, casting a shadow across the barren planet. The silence of centuries was broken. The human fleet was back. But out there, beyond the fleet, the Zalkorian ships were closing in. The ultimate test of humanity's survival was about to begin. Would humanity's ancient fleet rise again to reclaim the galaxy, or would the Zalkorians crush them once more? As the fleet sped through space, Sarah Monroe and her crew could only wonder, had they waited too long to fight back? The fleet moved through the galaxy like a storm. 1,000 ships, once dormant for centuries, now soared through the stars with all the force of humanity's last hope. The Ardent Justice led the charge, its hull creaking with the weight of years gone by. Sarah Monroe stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the vastness of space ahead. This was the moment, humanity's return to the galaxy, and their first real chance to fight back against the Zalkorians. The fleet's power was undeniable, yet there was an undeniable fear within Sarah's heart. She had never faced an enemy as formidable as the Zalkorians. Their warships were massive, their technology centuries ahead of anything humanity had ever created. The ships in her fleet were old, their systems cobbled together by the desperate hands of the few humans left. They would need every ounce of strength, every strategy, and every bit of courage to stand a chance. "We've detected Zalkorian ships ahead." Lieutenant Carter's voice broke into Sarah's thoughts. She turned toward him, her gaze steely. "How many?" Sarah asked, her voice steady. 6 Zalkorian dreadnoughts, Commander," Carter replied, his hands flying over his console. "They're on an intercept course." Sarah felt her heart race. 6 ships. That was more than they had expected. The Zalkorian fleet was powerful, but the human fleet had something they didn't, the element of surprise. For centuries, the Zalkorians had believed humanity was extinct. Now it was too late for them to prepare. They were about to learn the hard way that the humans had never truly been defeated. "We're outnumbered," Sarah said, her voice firm. "But we've got one advantage. They don't know what we're capable of yet. Prepare for battle." The command deck exploded into action. Officers scrambled to their stations, preparing weapons and shields for the impending clash. The Ardent Justice and the rest of the fleet engaged their engines, closing the gap between them and the Zalkorian ships. The tension in the air was palpable. This would be their first real test, and there was no turning back now. The Zalkorian fleet. Aboard one of the Zalkorian dreadnoughts, Jerok, the Zalkorian Supreme Commander, watched the human fleet on his holographic display. He had never expected this. Humanity was supposed to be a footnote in history, a species easily crushed. But now, they were back. He was certain the human fleet was no match for his superior forces, but something about this felt different. "Are their weapons fully charged?" Jerok asked, his voice cold. "Yes, Commander. "We have confirmed that all systems are operational," an officer responded. "We will destroy them as we did before." Jarek's mouth twisted into a smile. He was confident that humanity's ancient ships would be nothing more than a nuisance, nothing more than relics of a forgotten time. Bring them into range. Let's show them what happens when they challenge the Zalkorian Empire. But as the Zalkorian ships closed in, Jarek's confidence began to falter. The human fleet was closer than he anticipated, and the enemy ships seemed to be moving with a precision he hadn't expected. This wasn't just an old fleet. This was a well-organized force, and the Zalkorians were beginning to feel the pressure. The battle begins. The first shot was fired from the Ardent Justice. A blast of energy shot from the ship's cannons, striking the nearest Zalkorian ship. The Zalkorian ship's shields flared up in a desperate attempt to absorb the impact, but the blast was too powerful. The shield shimmered and cracked, and the enemy ship was sent spiraling. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Carter called out, a hint of excitement in his voice. "We've breached their shields." The crew of the Ardent Justice cheered, but Sarah held up a hand to silence them. "Stay focused," she commanded. "This battle is far from over." The Zalkorians fired back, their weapons blazing with terrifying intensity. The human fleet returned fire, but the Zalkorian ships were better equipped. Energy blasts lit up the void of space as the two forces clashed with devastating force. Every ship in the human fleet was under attack, their shields flickering under the pressure of the enemy's fire. Sarah watched as the Zalkorian dreadnoughts began to target the Ardent Justice. They were trying to take down the flagship first, hoping to break the human fleet's resolve. The ship shook violently as blasts hit its hull, but the Ardent Justice held firm. "Shields holding," Carter called out. "But we can't take many more hits like this." Sarah's mind raced. The Zalkorian ships were stronger, faster, and more advanced, but humanity had something they couldn't account for: determination. "Move us into position," Sarah ordered, her voice sharp. "We need to get closer. Target their engines and weapon systems. We can't win this battle by going blow for blow." The fleet moved closer, closing the distance between the two forces. The Ardent Justice fired another shot, hitting a Zalkorian dreadnought directly in its engine core. The enemy ship groaned as its engines exploded, sending the ship into a deadly spiral. "We've taken down one of their ships," Lieutenant Carter shouted, his voice filled with excitement. "We're not out yet." The Zalkorians, though, weren't backing down. They began to regroup, coordinating their attacks on the human fleet. Sarah knew that they had only a few minutes to make a real impact before the Zalkorians began to push back with full force. The tide turns. As the battle raged on, the human fleet held their ground, but they were running out of time. The Zalkorians had the upper hand in sheer numbers, and their ships were beginning to outmaneuver the human vessels. One by one, the human ships began to suffer damage. The Ardent Justice was holding, but its shields were weakening with every passing moment. "We've lost 2 ships," Carter shouted. "The fleet is starting to break apart." "Stay with me," Sarah yelled, her voice a sharp command. "We fought this hard. We're not going to let them win now." Sarah's fingers flew over the control panel, coordinating a counterattack. She knew that if they couldn't find a way to weaken the Zalkorian forces soon, the battle would be lost. And then it happened. A new signal appeared on their scanners. The large, unknown ship, completely different from anything the Zalkorians had seen before, appeared from behind a nearby asteroid field. The human fleet's backup had arrived. Sarah's eyes widened. It's them, the hidden fleet. Cliffhanger. Just as the Zalkorian dreadnoughts moved in for the kill, the new human ships emerged from the shadows, their hulls gleaming under the stars. They were larger, faster, and more advanced than the first fleet. The tide of the battle had just turned. The Zalkorians were about to face humanity's true power. Would the new fleet be enough to turn the battle in humanity's favor, or was this just the beginning of an even larger conflict? The sudden arrival of the hidden fleet sent shockwaves through the Zalkorian ranks. The Zalcorians had always believed they were invincible, that their overwhelming strength and superior technology would ensure their domination. But now they faced an unexpected threat, an entire fleet of unknown human warships, appearing from the shadows of space like ghosts from the past. The tide of the battle had shifted. Commander Sarah Monroe watched as the new ships emerged, their sleek forms cutting through the blackness of space with unmatched precision. These were the true weapons of humanity, forgotten relics from an ancient era, far more advanced than the fleet she had commanded. They had been dormant, hidden away on distant planets, waiting for this moment to return. "Lieutenant Carter, what's their status?" Sarah asked, her eyes fixed on the screen. "They're not responding to our communications yet, Commander," Carter replied. "But their movement patterns suggest they're aligned with us. They're positioning themselves for an attack." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Let's make it count. Prepare for immediate strike. Focus on their engines and weapon systems." The Hidden Fleet. The new fleet was led by the Elysian Fury, a massive warship older than the Ardent Justice, but far more powerful. Its hull was made of an alloy that no enemy could penetrate, and its weapons were unlike anything the Zalcorians had ever seen. The fleet's AI systems, long dormant, began to stir as the ships powered up, linking with the Ardent Justice and the rest of the human forces. The human fleet had been scattered and lost for centuries, hidden from the eyes of the Zalcorians. The Zalcorians had always believed that humanity had been wiped out during the Great War, but they were wrong. The Hidden Fleet had been waiting for the right moment to strike. As the ships of the Hidden Fleet moved into position, their weapon systems began to hum with deadly energy. The Zalcorians, still reeling from the shock of the first wave, began to regroup, but it was too late. The counterattack. On the Zalcorian dreadnoughts, Jurek's confidence began to slip away as the human fleet advanced. His warships, though mighty, had no answers for the sudden appearance of the Hidden Fleet. The humans had been silent for centuries, and now they were coming back in full force. "Commander, their firepower is beyond anything we've encountered," one of Jurek's officers reported. "We're being overwhelmed." Jurek clenched his fists. He had underestimated humanity, and now, it seemed, his empire was at risk. "Bring our full force to bear. We will not allow these pathetic humans to destroy what we've built." As Jurek ordered a counterattack, the Zalcorians' remaining dreadnoughts began to fire at the Elysian Fury and its sister ships. But the Hidden Fleet was ready. The Elysian Fury fired back, its weapons cutting through the enemy ships like a knife through butter. Explosions lit up the void as Zalcorian ships were torn apart. One by one, the mighty Zalcorian ships fell, their hulks drifting into space. But despite their powerful counterattacks, the Zalcorians were struggling to keep up with the speed and precision of the human ships. The Hidden Fleet's weapons were superior, and the human forces were more organized than ever. Sarah Monroe's command, combined with the power of the ancient fleet, was proving too much for the Zalcorians to handle. A dangerous move. As the battle intensified, the Zalcorian forces began to retreat, but not without a plan. Jurek had one last trick up his sleeve. He ordered his fleet to scatter and regroup, launching smaller, faster attack ships toward the human fleet in an attempt to weaken their lines. "Don't let them escape," Sarah yelled. "All ships, engage those smaller units. We can't afford to let them regroup." The human fleet moved quickly, engaging the Zalcorian attack ships with precision. But as the battle continued, Sarah began to notice something strange. The Zalcorian ships, though retreating, weren't acting like they had given up. They were positioning themselves. It was almost as if they were waiting for something. "Lieutenant Carter, what's happening? Are we missing something?" Sarah asked. "The plan is simple," Griffin replied. "We hit them before they can regroup. We don't let them take the time to rebuild their forces. The Zalcorians are already on their way to a nearby star system, one we've been monitoring for months. We need to move quickly. If we can catch them off guard, we'll cripple their ability to fight back. But we have no time to waste." The weight of the situation settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. She could feel the eyes of her crew on her, waiting for her decision. This was it. They had won the battle, but now they had to face the reality that their enemy was not going to let them off the hook. It was time to finish what they had started. "Prepare the fleet," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We're going to take the fight to them. We'll hit them hard, hit them fast. If we wait, they'll recover, and this war will drag on longer than it needs to. Let's make sure we finish it now." The Zalkorian rebuilding. Jarok, the Zalkorian Supreme Commander, stood in front of a holographic map, his sharp eyes studying the data carefully. The defeat at the hands of humanity's ancient fleet had been humiliating, but he was no fool. Zalkorians were proud, but they were also resilient. And now, with the remnants of his fleet scattered, he had a new plan. "Commander, we've located the human fleet," an officer reported. "They are regrouping. They're preparing for another strike, but they haven't discovered our full strength yet." Jarok turned, his face a mask of cold determination. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "But this time, we won't make the same mistake. We'll lure them into a trap. We'll destroy their fleet piece by piece. Let them think they can win. Let them believe they have the advantage. And when they arrive at our base, we'll show them just how wrong they are." Jarok was calculating. He knew humanity was not like the other species they had conquered. They were resourceful, determined, and most importantly, they had a weapon that could not be ignored. Their hidden fleet. That was something the Zalkorians hadn't expected. But now, Jarok was determined to make sure the next battle would not be one they could win so easily. "Activate the traps," he ordered. "If they want to fight, we will give them a fight they will regret." Humanity's advance. Sarah Monroe stood at the helm of the Ardent Justice, watching as the fleet made its way to the Zalkorian star system. Her mind raced. She knew the Zalkorians were cunning, and their defeat earlier had likely been a mere setback in their long-term plans. They would have learned from their mistakes, regrouped, and now they were coming back stronger than ever. "We're entering the Zalkorian system, Commander," Lieutenant Carter announced. "We've picked up multiple energy signatures from their base. They've prepared for us." Sarah nodded, her mind already shifting to tactics. The fleet had to move fast. They couldn't afford to waste time. The longer they took, the more prepared the Zalkorians would be. But the Zalkorians were masters of deception. The enemy might be setting a trap, and she had to prepare her forces for that eventuality. "Prepare to drop out of warp," Sarah said. "All ships, get into position. Once we arrive, we move in fast and hit them hard. We don't give them a chance to recover." The Ardent Justice and the hidden fleet moved together, their engines roaring as they dropped out of warp and into the heart of the Zalkorian system. What greeted them, however, was not the expected base or fleet. Instead, the human ships found themselves surrounded by a strange, glowing nebula. "Commander, there's a problem," Carter said, his voice filled with concern. "I'm detecting energy fluctuations inside the nebula. It's like the whole area is being charged. It's a trap, Commander." Before Sarah could respond, the Zalkorian fleet appeared out of nowhere. They had been waiting, hidden within the nebula, and now they unleashed their full force on the human fleet. Thousands of ships, more than Sarah had ever anticipated, emerged from the energy cloud and launched a devastating first strike. "We're outnumbered," Carter shouted as the Ardent Justice rocked under enemy fire. "They've been preparing for us." The Battle of the Nebula. The battle was chaos. The human fleet was caught off guard, their ships scattered and surrounded by Zalkorian warships on all sides. The nebula interfered with their communications and sensors, making it nearly impossible to get a clear read on the enemy's movements. It was a perfect trap. "Shield holding," Lieutenant Carter called out, but his voice was tinged with panic. "We're taking damage across the fleet." Sarah gritted her teeth. The hidden fleet had come with them, but now they were fighting a battle on unfavorable terms. The Zalkorians had not only outnumbered them, but had carefully planned their ambush. "We need to break free," Sarah yelled. "All ships, focus on the Zalkorian dreadnoughts. We break through their lines, or we don't get out of this alive." The Ardent Justice fired its weapons, aiming at the heart of the enemy fleet. A blast from its main cannon tore through a Zalkorian ship, but it wasn't enough to slow the advance of the enemy forces. The fleet was outmatched and outnumbered, and even the hidden fleet wasn't enough to turn the tide. Cliffhanger. As the battle raged on, Sarah's heart sank. The human fleet was losing ground. Zalkorian ships closed in, and it seemed like there was no way out. But then, a strange light flickered on Sarah's console. A new signature appeared. Another fleet, one far more advanced than anything they had seen before, and it was heading toward them. Could this be the final trump card for humanity, or was it just another trick from the Zalkorians? The Ardent Justice shuddered violently as another barrage of Zalkorian fire hit the shields. Sarah Monroe gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white with tension. The Zalkorian fleet had set a trap, and now it seemed like humanity's ancient fleet was on the verge of being overwhelmed. Their weapons fired at the enemy, but it wasn't enough to stop the constant wave of Zalkorian ships that encircled them. The nebula, once thought to be a hidden advantage, now only served to obscure their vision and trap them in a deadly cage. "Commander Monroe," Lieutenant Carter called out, his voice strained. "Our shields are down to 30%. We can't hold out much longer. The Zalkorians are closing in." Sarah's mind raced. The Ardent Justice had taken heavy damage, and every ship in the fleet was in a similar state. The hidden fleet had fought valiantly, but even their superior firepower couldn't match the sheer number of Zalkorian vessels. They were being squeezed into a corner. It seemed as though there was no escape. But then, just as Sarah was about to give the order to retreat, something strange happened. On her radar, a new signal appeared, large and powerful, coming from the edge of the nebula. She stared at the readings, her mind racing. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes narrowing. Carter looked at the readings in disbelief. That's not possible. Commander, there's a fleet out there, one we've never seen before." The signal grew stronger. It was a massive fleet, more advanced than anything humanity had ever known. The ships were sleek, shining with an ethereal glow, their hulls reflecting the faint light of the nebula, and their weapon systems were unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. "Are they human?" Sarah asked, though part of her feared the answer. Carter shook his head, his eyes wide with astonishment. "No, Commander. These ships are not human. They're something else. A new power emerges." The unknown fleet dropped out of warp speed, appearing in the midst of the Zalkorian forces like a ghost in the darkness. The Zalkorians, momentarily stunned, hesitated in their assault, and the human fleet seized the opportunity to regroup. The newly arrived ships moved with eerie precision, their advanced weaponry lighting up the darkness of space. With a single devastating volley, they tore through a dozen Zalkorian warships in seconds. "This is impossible," Jarak muttered to himself as he watched the unknown fleet devastate his forces. Where did they come from? The Zalkorian commander tried to regain control of his fleet, but the new enemy was too powerful. Every strike they delivered sent shockwaves through the Zalkorian ranks, and their ships began to break apart under the relentless fire. Within moments, the Zalkorians found themselves outmatched, their pride and arrogance shattered. On board the Ardent Justice, Sarah Monroe watched the battle unfold in awe. The unexpected fleet was tearing through the Zalkorians with shocking efficiency, obliterating their ships one by one. But who were these new enemies? And why had they come to help humanity now? "Lieutenant, do we have any contact with them?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We've tried, Commander," Carter replied. "They're not responding to our hails. It's like they're silent." The tides turn. The Zalkorian fleet, once so confident in their overwhelming numbers, was now in full retreat. They had never encountered a force like this before, an enemy that fought with the precision and power to match their own. The battle was turning in favor of the humans, but the question still remained. Who were these mysterious saviors? The unknown fleet continued to strike with surgical precision, disabling Zalkorian ships and forcing them into retreat. Every time a Zalkorian warship tried to regroup or reinforce its position, the mysterious fleet was there, cutting them down. The Zalkorians began to panic. They had never seen such tactics before. "Commander Monroe, we've broken through their lines," Carter exclaimed. "The Zalkorians are retreating. They're pulling back into the nebula." Sarah felt a rush of relief wash over her. The battle was nearly won, but there was still so much that didn't make sense. The human fleet had fought valiantly, but it was the mysterious fleet that had truly turned the tide. And now, as the last of the Zalkorian ships disappeared into the nebula, Sarah realized they were standing on the precipice of something much larger than they had ever anticipated. A mysterious message. Just as the Zalkorians disappeared into the nebula, the unknown fleet began to pull away, drifting toward the edge of the system. The battle was over, but there was still no communication from them. Sarah and her crew watched as the strange ships, silent and enigmatic, began to retreat into the vastness of space. "Commander, they're leaving," Carter said, his voice filled with confusion. "What do we do?" Sarah stood still for a moment, her thoughts racing. This fleet had come out of nowhere, and they had been the deciding factor in humanity's survival. But their sudden departure left more questions than answers. Why had they come to their aid? And who were they? "We follow them," Sarah said, her voice resolute. "We can't let this mystery slip away. Prepare the fleet. We're going after them." The Ardent Justice and the hidden fleet began to move toward the retreating ships. There was no time to waste. They couldn't let the mysterious fleet disappear without an explanation. This was their one chance to understand who these strange new allies were. As the fleet moved deeper into the star system, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something told her that they were about to uncover a truth far more dangerous than anything the Zalkorians had ever thrown at them. There was more at play here than just the war with the Zalkorians. This new fleet, this new power, was far from ordinary, and it seemed humanity had just stumbled into something far bigger than they could ever imagine. Cliffhanger. As the Ardent Justice and the fleet followed the mysterious ships, a new message appeared on Sarah's console. It wasn't from the fleet. It was from the nebula. An ancient signal, one that seemed to come from deep within the heart of space itself. The message was brief, but its meaning was clear. The time has come. Humanity's destiny awaits. The words echoed in Sarah's mind as she stared at the screen. Who had sent this message? And what did it mean for humanity? The unknown fleet had vanished into the distant reaches of space, leaving Sarah Monroe and the crew of the Ardent Justice with more questions than answers. The battle was won. The Zalkorians had been pushed back, their retreating fleet now scattered across the nebula. But the mysterious fleet that had turned the tide was now nowhere to be found. All Sarah and her crew could do was chase after them into the unknown. "We've tracked their last known position," Lieutenant Carter reported, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But there's nothing out there. No sign of them, Commander. It's like they disappeared." Sarah stood in front of the massive viewscreen, gazing into the vastness of space. The stars seemed endless, cold, and indifferent, yet her mind raced. Who were these strange ships? Where did they come from? And why had they appeared at that critical moment? Every instinct told her this was not the end of the mystery. In fact, it felt more like the beginning of something much larger, something far beyond the war with the Zalkorians. "Keep searching, Lieutenant," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We can't stop now. If they helped us once, they might help again. We need answers." A hidden power revealed. The human fleet continued its search, moving cautiously through the star system. The Ardent Justice led the charge, its sensors probing every inch of space. Then, after hours of searching, a breakthrough came. "Commander, Carter shouted, his voice crackling with excitement. "We've found something. A massive structure hidden in the asteroid belt. It wasn't on any of the maps. It looks artificial." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the hidden base of the mysterious fleet? Was it their home? She quickly gave the order for the fleet to converge on the coordinates. The Ardent Justice moved toward the asteroid field, its engines humming with power as they approached the unknown structure. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. There, hidden beneath the asteroids, was a colossal space station, a structure so massive that it seemed to be part of the very fabric of space itself. Its surface was dark, almost metallic, with intricate designs etched across its surface. The station was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its energy readings were off the charts, pulsing with an ancient power. As the fleet approached, a communication signal blinked on Sarah's screen. "Commander Monroe, we've received a message," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice trembling. "It's from the station. They'd want to talk." The first contact. The message was short but clear, transmitted in a language Sarah couldn't recognize. It was a series of strange symbols, patterns, and sounds. But despite the alien nature of the transmission, something in her gut told her this wasn't a threat. The tone was calm, even welcoming. Sarah turned to her communications officer, Lieutenant Walker. "Can you translate it?" she asked. Walker quickly worked his console, his fingers flying across the keys. "It's not a language I've seen before, but I'm picking up a pattern. It seems to be a form of ancient communication, possibly from a race long gone. Give me a moment." The tension on the bridge was palpable as Walker continued his work. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he turned to Sarah. "I've got it, Commander. The message is being decoded. It says, 'We are the Keepers. The time has come for you to understand your true purpose.'" The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Sarah felt her blood run cold. The Keepers. The time has come for what? She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss of the unknown. Everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was about to be shattered. "Send a response," Sarah ordered. "Ask them who they are and why they helped us. We need to understand what's going on." A daring approach. The response came quickly, as if the Keepers had been expecting this very question. The message was direct. "We have watched humanity for millennia. Now, the time has come for you to awaken." Sarah's mind raced. Watched humanity for millennia. Who were these beings? And what did they mean by awakening? Was this some kind of test, or were they offering humanity a power beyond comprehension? "Lieutenant Carter, prepare a team," Sarah said. "We're going in. We need to get to that station and find out what's really happening." The decision was made. The Ardent Justice and the fleet's ships moved cautiously toward the station, their guns trained on the unknown but determined not to provoke an attack. They made their way inside the massive structure, which seemed to open up for them, as if it were alive, welcoming them in. Inside the station, the environment was eerily quiet. The walls hummed with energy, but there was no sign of life. The air was still, and the massive halls were devoid of any human presence. As Sarah and her team moved deeper into the heart of the station, they came upon a massive chamber. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, atop which rested a glowing orb. It radiated an intense energy, its surface rippling with strange patterns, almost like it was alive. As they approached, the orb pulsed, and a voice resonated throughout the chamber. "Humanity," the voice said, "the time has come. You are not what you think you are. Your true potential lies dormant within you. You are the inheritors of an ancient legacy, a legacy that will change the fate of the galaxy." The voice echoed through Sarah's mind, filling her with a sense of awe and dread. What did this mean? Was humanity truly a part of something far older, far more powerful than they had ever imagined? Before she could process the magnitude of what was happening, the orb flared with brilliant light, blinding Sarah and her team. Cliffhanger. When the light faded, Sarah found herself standing alone in the chamber. The team was gone. The orb pulsed with energy, and in its glow, she could see images, visions of ancient civilizations, long extinct species, and an ancient war that spanned the stars. The voice returned, this time more urgent. You are the last hope. The darkness is coming. Awaken, humanity. Awaken to your true power. The light flickered, and the orb began to hum louder, its glow growing brighter with every passing second. Sarah had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. Whatever power the Keepers had been hiding, humanity was about to unlock it, and with it, the fate of the galaxy would be forever changed. The chamber was silent. The orb continued to pulse with a mysterious energy, its bright light casting eerie shadows across the walls of the ancient station. Sarah Monroe's heart raced as the last words of the voice echoed in her mind. Awaken, humanity. Awaken to your true power. She blinked, trying to clear her vision. The blinding light from the orb had left her temporarily disoriented, but now, as her surroundings slowly came into focus, she felt something else, a presence. It was as if the entire station was alive, watching her, waiting. Lieutenant Monroe. Her voice trembled as she called out. Lieutenant Carter. Anyone. There was no answer. No sign of her crew. The room seemed to breathe with an otherworldly rhythm, the hum of ancient energy vibrating through the air. Sarah took a step forward, drawn inexplicably toward the pedestal where the orb floated, suspended in midair, its surface rippling like liquid. Her hand instinctively reached out toward it. But just as her fingers were about to make contact, a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. Do not touch it. The voice was sudden, deep, and somehow familiar. Sarah jerked back in surprise. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a figure slowly emerged. It was humanoid but not quite human. Its eyes glowed faintly with the same energy as the orb, and its movements were fluid, like that of a creature at home in the vastness of space. The figure spoke again, its tone calm but insistent. You must not interfere with what lies within. The power you seek is not meant for your kind. Not yet. Sarah stared at the figure, her mind racing. This was no ordinary being. It felt ancient, older than anything she could comprehend. The voice, the warning. It all seemed too important to ignore. Who are you? Sarah asked, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. And what is this place? The figure tilted its head, as if considering the question. After a long pause, it spoke. I am one of the Keepers. We have watched your kind for millennia. The time has come for you to understand your place in the universe. The word Keeper sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. These beings had been observing humanity for longer than she could imagine. But why? Why now? The orb you see is the key to unlocking your true potential. The Keeper continued, his voice echoing with a deep resonance. It is an ancient artifact, forged long before your species ever existed. It contains knowledge, power, and the essence of an ancient race, one that once ruled the stars. But that power is not to be wielded lightly. Only when you are ready will it awaken fully. Ready for what? Sarah asked, her curiosity now overpowering her caution. She had to know more. She had to understand what this was all about. The Keeper took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Ready to fight. Sarah frowned. Fight? Fight who? The Zalcorians are not your greatest threat, the Keeper said, his voice growing colder. They are only a symptom of a much larger problem. A darkness is coming, one that threatens not just humanity but the entire galaxy. And you, Commander Monroe, you will be the key to its defeat. Sarah felt her blood run cold. The darkness. What was this being talking about? And why had they chosen her? Before she could respond, the Keeper raised a hand, and the orb flickered violently. The entire chamber seemed to tremble as the energy inside the orb surged. The time is now, the Keeper said, his voice commanding. You must awaken the power within your species. The choice is yours. Lead humanity to its destiny, or watch as it is consumed by the darkness. Suddenly, a piercing flash of light filled the room, and Sarah was thrown back, slamming into the cold, metallic floor. The keeper vanished into the shadows, and the orb ceased glowing. Back on the ardent justice, Sarah awoke with a sharp intake of breath. Her head ached, and her vision was blurry, but she was no longer in the chamber with the orb. She was back on the ardent justice, surrounded by her crew. The ship was quiet, the usual hum of the engines replaced by a tense stillness. "Commander Monroe, are you all right?" Carter's voice sounded concerned. Sarah blinked as she slowly pushed herself to her feet. Her hand went to her head, still feeling the residual effect of the vision she had just experienced. It had felt so real, like she was in the presence of the keeper himself. But it couldn't have been real, could it? I'm fine," Sarah muttered, looking around. The crew was looking at her with confusion and concern. "Where are we? What happened?" "We're still in the asteroid field," Carter reported. "We've been trying to reach you, Commander. You went into some kind of trance for several minutes. We couldn't raise you on comms. What's going on?" Sarah shook her head, trying to clear the fog in her mind. She felt the weight of what had just transpired. The vision, the keeper, the orb, it was all real. But why had she been chosen? What was this darkness the keeper had spoken of? "I saw something," Sarah said slowly. "I spoke with one of the keepers. They've been watching humanity for millennia. They say humanity has a great purpose, a destiny." "What kind of destiny?" Carter asked, his brow furrowed with skepticism. Sarah hesitated, her gaze drifting back to the view screen, where the distant stars twinkled coldly. "They say we're the key to stopping something much darker than the Zolkorians. The Keepers believe we can unlock a power within ourselves, something ancient." Carter looked at her, disbelief evident in his eyes. "And you believe them? After everything we've been through?" Sarah took a deep breath. The truth was hard to accept, but everything had led her to this point. Humanity had faced countless threats, but this was something else entirely. Something much bigger. "I don't know if I believe them," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper, "but we have to prepare. If the Keepers are right, humanity's fate is more important than anything we faced before, and we need to be ready." As the crew processed her words, Sarah gazed out into the vastness of space, where an unknown darkness was slowly, steadily, moving toward them. The galaxy was on the brink of something massive, and humanity, for better or worse, was at the center of it all. Cliffhanger. As Sarah stood on the bridge, the ardent justice suddenly picked up a strange signal. It was faint, but it was there. A transmission, coming from deep within the heart of the galaxy. A signal that could mean one of two things. Either the darkness was coming, or the time for humanity to awaken had finally arrived. The signal was clear. The galaxy will burn, and only the awakened can stop it. The message sent a chill down Sarah's spine. It was just the beginning, and whatever was coming, humanity was going to be at the heart of it. The battle for the galaxy's survival was only just beginning.